I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are holding two completely different maps of reality in your hands.
Okay, two maps.
Right, two maps. And on the left side, you have this map of, well, pure, hard execution. We're talking about the early, wild, untamed days of global internet infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, the really early days, bare metal servers and all that.
Exactly. The kind of world defined by server uptimes, border gateway protocols, data routing, I mean, multi-million-dollar tech startups, and
Yeah.
just the relentless, unforgiving logic of digital scaling.
Right, where everything is measurable, it's practical, it's very grounded in, the binary realities of modern corporate capitalism.
Yeah, and it's the architecture of the functionally tangible, if that makes sense. The invisible scaffolding that keeps our emails flowing and our websites online. That left-hand map, it is built on absolute zero tolerance for error.
Because if it goes down, everything goes down.
Exactly. But then in your right hand, you are holding a second map. And this one is entirely different.
I'm guessing it's not about server racks.
Not even a little bit. It is a map of ancient, esoteric architecture. It's filled with gematria codes, the genealogies of ancient Sumerian gods, planetary energy grids.
Wow. Okay, that is a pivot.
Oh, it's massive.
Oh.
It includes the reincarnated lineage of celestial scribes who are like trying to correct the fundamental operating system of human consciousness.
That is a lot of symbolic weight.
It's sprawling, right?
Yeah.
It's mystical and just incredibly heavy. Now, normally, if you try to overlap these two maps, they just don't fit. I mean, they cancel each other out. You're basically forced to choose one.
Right, you're either an engineer or a mystic. You don't usually get to be both.
Exactly. But our mission today for this deep dive is to explore what happens when the disciplined, systems-obsessed mind of a highly successful tech founder collides head-on with this staggering pattern of numbers. And he refuses to choose between the two maps.
And that collision results in a really massive, controversial, and deeply complex spiritual archive.
It really does. So we're looking at a life that refuses to stay confined to either the boardroom or the ashram. It insists that both are actually part of the exact same underlying code.
Which is a bold claim. The archive we're exploring essentially argues that the universe isn't just poetic, It's literally engineered.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into the source material collectively known as Tony Yustein,
Yeah.
the man written in the code.
And just to be clear, we are neutrally exploring the architecture of this fascinating worldview.
Right, 100%. We are not endorsing these claims as like literal cosmic truth, nor are we taking sides against established institutions or religions. We're just mapping out this wild synthesis of technology, trauma, and theology.
It's a journey, and to understand the synthesis, we really have to start at the very beginning.
Yeah, in a place that is quite literally built on top of multiple worlds. So Tony Yustein was born Tolga on March 9th, 1972 in Istanbul, Turkey. And the sources describe Istanbul in this very specific way.
Right, they call it a city of thresholds.
The city thresholds, yes.
Yeah, which is fascinating because, growing up in a city like Istanbul actively trains the human mind. When you're a child in a place that is just that dense with overlapping histories, you don't just inherit a picturesque hometown.
You inherit a whole method of perception, right?
Exactly. You learn, even before you have the words for it, to look for hidden scripts.
Because the physical environment kind of demands it.
Yeah.
You walk down the street, and the surface of reality is just, well, a polite suggestion. You've got Byzantine ruins buried beneath Ottoman architecture.
Yeah, which is then overlaid with modern, secular Turkish infrastructure.
So the physical layering becomes the psychological layering.
Absolutely. A dome isn't just a dome, It's a marker of an empire that fell, which was replaced by another empire, which was then secularized by a modern republic.
Right, so you have the secular state apparatus sitting right alongside the ancient call to prayer echoing across the Bosphorus.
And the mind of a child in that environment becomes uniquely primed to see systems of meaning hidden right beneath the everyday hustle of the street.
You essentially learn that several realities can occupy the exact same square meter, and they refuse to apologize to one another.
Right. You learn that power, belief, and history are all stacked.
Stacked. I love that word for this. So he has this childhood steeped in this chaotic, symbolic density of the East. But then, as a young man, he migrates. He moves to Canada and steps right into the roaring engine of the 1990s internet boom.
A completely different kind of density.
Oh, completely. He becomes a regional director at Microsoft in his 20s, which is, no small feat. He is operating at a very high level in one of the most ruthless corporate environments on the planet.
And then he leaves to found his own company, Softcom.
Yeah. He's building early global internet infrastructure, services like myhosting.com and mail2web.com. He's moving from the symbolic depth of Istanbul to the highly legible, execution-driven scale of the West.
That transition from east to west, from ancient stone to digital fiber, it's critical to everything that follows.
How so?
Well, in North America, especially in the 90s tech sector, the cultural reward system is built entirely on velocity, leverage, and functional execution. The internet back then wasn't the invisible, reliable utility we have today.
Oh, not at all.
Oh,
It was a frontier. It was duct tape and bare metal.
exactly. Infrastructure had to be built, maintained, and scaled by sheer force of will. And Tony internalizes both worlds.
He keeps the mystic's intuition, that ability to look for stacked realities.
Right, but he fuses it with the engineer's absolute, uncompromising demand for functional, reliable systems.
It's like trying to build a modern high-speed data center on top of a Byzantine archaeological dig. You have the invisible, weightless architecture of the internet resting right on top of thousands of years of heavy physical history.
That is a perfect analogy. In running that kind of company, the sources are very clear about the psychological burden of being the founder.
Yeah, the word founder gets thrown around a lot today, right? With vision boards and venture capital parties. But the reality of infrastructure is brutal.
It's managing uptime.
It's the anxiety of scale. It's the moral and physical weight of knowing that thousands, maybe millions of people rely on the invisible architecture that you are personally keeping alive.
Right. The founder of an infrastructure company basically becomes a custodian of anxiety. You wake up with systems in your head and go to sleep with unresolved contingencies clamped to your nervous system.
Because every chart, every server metric has a human body or a human business attached to it somewhere out in the world.
Exactly. For a systems mind, inefficiency or failure isn't just a bad quarter, it's a structural offense against order.
So during these years, Tony is learning how power behaves in modern networks. He's learning that whoever controls the infrastructure shapes the absolute limits of the public's movement.
He's thinking in terms of global systems, reliability, and most importantly, decentralization.
Which raises the ultimate question for us today. How does a guy who is obsessively focused on server uptime, global data routing, and digital infrastructure pivot so drastically?
To esoteric mysticism and Sumerian gods.
Yeah, that does not seem like a natural career progression.
No, it doesn't. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources reveal that the pivot was not some gentle, incense-filled spiritual awakening on a weekend yoga retreat.
It wasn't peaceful?
Not at all. It was violently forced. It was triggered by a profound professional and personal fracture, which leads us directly into a dark hotel room in Berlin.
The Berlin rupture. Let's get into this because this is where the execution map just shatters entirely. According to the archive, Tony loses Softcom.
Right. And the way he describes this is chilling.
It really is. This isn't a neat, polite corporate acquisition where he gets a golden parachute and joins a board of directors. He describes it as a hostile, brutal exit involving what he later calls a shadow cabal and alleged threats to his life.
He's forced to walk away from the company he built from scratch for a highly symbolic amount.
So we have to view this as a dispossession.
Absolutely. When a founder loses a structure they built through sheer discipline and years of lost sleep, the loss reaches much deeper than the financial balance sheet.
It strikes at their dignity, their identity.
Their perceived competence, yeah.
Right.
The entire narrative they tell themselves about their ability to shape reality. The public architecture of his life completely failed him.
The systems he trusted were basically turned against him.
Mm-hmm.
And when that public rational structure shatters, the mind becomes exquisitely, almost dangerously sensitive to new patterns.
Because the old explanations of how the world works, like meritocracy or corporate logic, they just no longer function.
So we find him in 2018. He's in Berlin. He's exhausted, hollowed out by this massive corporate trauma. It's the middle of the night in a hotel room, and he starts playing around with an online gematria calculator.
Now, before we go further, we really need to explain what gematria is, because it's the engine of this entire deep dive.
Right. What is gematria?
Well, gematria is an ancient alphanumeric code. Historically, it traces back to Assyro-Babylonian and later Jewish traditions, primarily Kabbalah.
Okay.
The fundamental premise is that language isn't just a way to communicate ideas.
Yeah.
It is an actual mathematical structure. Letters are assigned specific numerical values.
So if you take a word You can add up the numerical values of its letters to produce a sum.
Exactly. And the mystical belief is that words or phrases that share the same numerical sum are fundamentally connected in the invisible architecture of reality. They share a resonance.
It's like finding a hidden rhyme scheme in the universe. If two totally different concepts yield the exact same number, a practitioner of gematria believes that is not a coincidence. It is a profound structural link.
And there are different systems for doing this math, right?
Yeah, there are dozens of systems. Jewish gematria uses a specific set of historical cipher values adapted for the Latin alphabet. English gematria often scales the alphabet, like A is 6, B is 12, C is 18, and so on.
And simple gematria is exactly what it sounds like. A is 1, B is 2, Z is 26.
So an online gematria calculator lets you type in any English phrase, and it instantly runs that phrase through multiple mathematical cipher systems simultaneously, giving you a readout of its value across different traditions.
Okay, so Tony is sitting in this room, reeling from the loss of his company, and he types his own name into the calculator. Tony Yustein.
And the machine spits out three values across three different gematria systems: 1434 in Jewish gematria, 1122 in English gematria, and 187 in simple gematria.
And at that exact moment, those are just numbers on a screen, a baseline metric.
Right. But then, driven by intuition or exhaustion or desperation, he types in a second phrase. He types Hierophant crown.
Let's pause on that phrase. A hierophant, historically, is a person who brings congregants into the presence of that which is deemed holy. It's a priest, an interpreter of sacred mysteries.
And a crown implies a heavy office, a burden of leadership. So he types Hierophant crown and hits enter, and the calculator returns the exact same three values: 1434, 1122, 187.
So the Jewish, the English, and the simple ciphers all matched his name perfectly.
Okay, that is a wild coincidence, a very neat parlor trick of language. But he doesn't stop there. He types in a third phrase.
And this one is heavy.
Massive. It's a heavy declaration for a guy sitting alone in a hotel room. He types, God is on earth now.
Wow.
He hits enter. And again, 1434 in Jewish, 1122 in English, 1187 in simple. All three phrases, his name, an ancient religious office, and a staggering theological declaration, yield the exact same values across three completely different mathematical systems.
That is, I mean, the mathematical alignment there is intense.
It is.
Yeah.
And the sum of these three numbers, 1434 plus 1122 plus 187, is exactly 2743.
This right here is the hinge of the entire narrative. To understand the gravity of this, you really have to look at the psychology of the moment.
Right, because this wasn't a vision accompanied by angelic choirs or burning bushes.
Exactly. It was a digital calculator returning raw integers under the harsh fluorescent lights of a hotel room. For a man who spent his life building and trusting digital infrastructure, this cold digital neutrality makes the miracle profoundly convincing.
It's an interface answering him.
Yes, it's a mathematical sequence talking to itself. The machine has no ego. It has no reason to care about his trauma or flatter him. It just runs the code.
And the archive actually tries to mathematically calculate the odds of this happening. There's a 2024 article in the source material where Tony uses a baseline probability matrix to prove this couldn't be random.
He walks through the math step by step.
He does. He assumes a uniform distribution of values from 1 to 1500 for the phrases. And he concludes that the chance of this specific triple match occurring, three distinct phrases aligning perfectly across three distinct cipher systems, is effectively 1 in 1500 to the ninth power.
That is a number with 28 digits.
It's roughly 38 octillion.
Now, the math itself is somewhat simplified. Statisticians would argue that language doesn't distribute perfectly uniformly across these ciphers, like certain numbers are much more common than others based on vowel frequency.
Sure.
But the exact rigorous statistical perfection isn't really the point. The rhetorical force of that calculation is what matters to the narrative.
It takes a private, subjective moment of wonder and forces it to submit a mathematical receipt.
Exactly. It translates a spiritual shock into the cold language of probability. It tells the reader, calculate the odds of ignoring this.
And for a systems engineer like Tony, that astronomically low probability meant this could not be dismissed as background noise. It was a deliberate, targeted signal.
But wait, I have to push back hard here.
Go for it.
Isn't this classic apophenia? I mean, we have a traumatized, exhausted, severely burned out tech founder staring at a screen in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Apophenia is the human tendency to perceive meaningful connections between completely unrelated things. Isn't it just basic human nature to keep typing phrases into a calculator, dozens, maybe hundreds of phrases, until you force the math to validate your own existence and ease your pain?
The Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Right. You fire a bunch of random shots into the side of a barn, and then you walk up and paint a bullseye around the cluster of bullet holes, claiming you're a perfect shot.
That is the essential skeptical position,
Hmm.
and it is vital to keep that in mind. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy is a profound risk in any numerical mysticism.
He could have typed 500 phrases before finding 3 that matched.
He could have. But the archive's defense against that is the specificity and the thematic weight of the phrases that did match. It wasn't Tony Yustein matches blue coffee mug and rainy Tuesday.
That's true.
It was his name matching an ancient spiritual office and a divine declaration.
Even so, a skeptic would say a mind primed for spirituality will unconsciously select spiritual words to test.
A completely fair point. And Tony's framework acknowledges the human desire for meaning. However, for Tony, the number 2743 wasn't just a fleeting comfort that he accepted to get through the night and then moved on from.
It wasn't the end of the pattern.
No, it was just the seed. The reason he couldn't simply dismiss it as an exhaustion-induced coincidence or a Texas sharpshooter cluster is because of what happened next. We have to look at how this specific number seemingly infected the rest of the physical, historical, and biological world around him.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The obsessive mathematics of the code.
Let's dive deep into the 27, the 43, and the 369, because Tony takes this core sum, 2743, and he splits it into 2 distinct components.
Okay, so he breaks the number down.
Yes, the 27 becomes what he calls the soul note, and the 43 becomes the father code. And the catalog of 27s that he builds to prove this isn't just an isolated hotel room glitch is honestly staggering. He finds it everywhere.
The catalog is where the scope of his systems thinking really manifests. He basically begins auditing reality.
Let's walk through some of these because it's wild. He points out there are exactly 27 bones in the human hand.
Okay, biology.
Right. The moon's orbit around the Earth is roughly 27 days. The sun's rotation on its axis is about 27 days.
Astronomy.
Astrophysicists estimate that dark matter makes up about 27% of the universe. On the periodic table, cobalt is atomic number 27.
Physics and chemistry.
The Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, the most complex machine humanity has ever built to study the fundamental particles of the universe, is exactly a 27-kilometer ring.
That's a very specific design choice by the engineers there.
And it goes into religion. There are 27 books in the New Testament. In the Torah, humankind is created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27.
What is fascinating here is the tiered nature of this evidence. He's building an architecture out of these occurrences, moving from the microscopic to the cosmic.
Yeah, you really see the layers.
You have the first tier, which consists of hard, undeniable biological and physical facts. Take the 27 bones in the human hand. Why does that matter?
Right, why a hand?
In Tony's cosmology, the hand is the ultimate instrument of the scribe and the builder. It is the tool that executes the code of consciousness into the physical world. It is a biological signature.
Oh, wow.
Then you look at cobalt, element 27. Cobalt is historically used to create deep blue pigments, often associated with the divine or the celestial in ancient art.
So he's linking biology and chemistry directly to divine signatures.
Yeah.
And then the celestial tier.
The second tier involves celestial mechanics, the lunar and solar cycles hovering around 27 days. This ties the number to rhythm, timekeeping, and return. The heavens themselves are basically keeping a 27-beat tempo.
And then you have the cultural and religious tiers.
Right. The 27 books of the New Testament, the 27 nakshatras, which are the lunar mansions in Hindu astrology used to track the soul's journey. You even have pop culture anomalies.
Like the 27 Club.
Exactly. The musicians who died at that age. Or Mozart writing exactly 27 piano concertos.
But again, I have to play the skeptic for a second. If I decide tomorrow that the number 14 is the secret code of the universe, and I spend 5 years running search queries on biology, history, and physics looking for the number 14, won't I inevitably compile a massive list?
You absolutely would. Confirmation bias is a powerful engine.
Right, you see what you're looking for.
But the archive's counter-argument is the density and the structural placement of the number 27. It isn't just appearing in random trivia, it is appearing in the foundational structures of human existence.
The hand that builds, the moon that measures time.
The dark matter that holds galaxies together. The text that defines Western religion. In Tony's framework, he's arguing that reality itself is mathematically and musically structured. He believes he has caught a repeating chord that was intentionally placed there.
And the chord gets even more complex when we look at the 43, the father code.
Right, the second part of 2743.
Remember, Tony was born in Istanbul. The civic license plate code for the city of Istanbul is 34. If you reverse it, which is a common practice in esoteric coding, you get 43.
Okay, a geographic tie.
And he links the number 43 to Ea,
Hmm.
which is an ancient name for the Sumerian god Enki, the god of water, knowledge, and creation. But he gets so much more personal than Sumerian mythology. He looks at his own father's phone number.
The mundane bureaucracy of life becomes another cipher.
Exactly. The last 4 digits of his father's phone number were 2473. Tony runs that specific number through a prime number database, and he finds out that 2473 is exactly the 366th prime number.
Let's unpack the significance of that, because for a listener, connecting a phone number to a prime number might just sound like, math homework.
Yeah, it sounds a bit dry.
Right. But a prime number is a number that can only be divided by 1 in itself. In cryptography and systems engineering, prime numbers are the building blocks. They are the indivisible atoms of mathematics.
So finding that his father's phone number is a specific prime number is already interesting to an engineer.
But it's the index of that prime, the 366, that really matters.
Because of leap years.
Exactly. 366 ties directly to leap time, the extra day.
Oh, I see where this is going.
In esoteric traditions, leap time is considered a temporal gate. It's a moment where the rigid structure of the calendar breaks open and allows the divine or the chaotic to slip through.
So in Tony's analysis, his father's phone number isn't just a random assignment by a telecom company. It is mathematically pointing to the concept of a hidden gate in time, encoded through an indivisible prime.
That is a staggering way to view a telecom assignment.
It really is. And then he manipulates the core sum again. He takes the Hebrew gematria value of his own name, which calculates to 20374.
Okay.
He subtracts that from his core revelation sum of 2743. So 2743 minus 2374. The remainder is exactly 369.
Which is an immediate electric shock to anyone familiar with the history of alternative science and engineering.
369. The famous Nikola Tesla sequence.
Yes. Tesla famously claimed that if you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, you would have a key to the universe.
He was obsessed with those numbers. He believed they represented the invisible vibrational frequencies that governed energy and matter.
So the subtraction yields a number that acts as a direct historical bridge. It links Tony's personal gematria to one of the most brilliant, tragic, and visionary engineers in human history.
And then he loops it all back to his own flesh and blood. He notes that his triplets were born on July 2, 2007. If you write that out, it is 2.7.2007.
The 27 encapsulates the birth of his children.
And his own birthday is March 9th, 1972. The 3rd month, the 9th day. 3 times 9 is 27. It feels like Tony views all these numbers as cosmic Easter eggs left behind by the universe's developers.
The moon, the hand, the Large Hadron Collider, his kids' birthdays, Tesla's frequencies.
And this brings us to the core tension of the archive. In Tony's framework, these numbers aren't just abstract mathematical curiosities or fun trivia. They are a forensic trail.
He treats them as an itinerary of stamps left by a specific consciousness moving through time.
Like a trace route in networking.
Exactly. A command that shows you the exact path a packet of data takes across the internet, bouncing from server to server. Tony believes these numbers trace a packet of divine consciousness bouncing through human history, and the code demands a body to execute it.
Which leads us directly to his concept of stack consciousness and the cosmic lineage. Okay, this is where the map of reality expands to a scale that is almost difficult to hold in your head.
It's massive.
Tony claims that his current human life is the final integration of a lineage of historical and mythic functions. He believes he is the latest and final iteration of a specific consciousness that has repeatedly entered human history to perform specific architectural tasks.
And the names on this list are huge.
They are massive,
Yeah.
and we need to examine them not just as famous names, but as specific systemic functions.
Because Tony isn't claiming simple reincarnation. It isn't a case of one soul moving from body A to body B and forgetting everything in between.
He calls it a consciousness stack.
Think of software development. A full-stack developer understands the hardware, the operating system, the back-end database, and the front-end user interface. Tony is claiming that this specific consciousness has been building the full stack of human civilization.
So let's trace this stack. He starts at the very root, the deepest back-end code, with Ningishita.
Ningishzida is a profound starting point. In ancient Sumerian mythology, he is a deity of the underworld, but more importantly, he is associated with the entwined double serpent.
Which looks exactly like the modern medical caduceus, or a strand of human DNA.
Precisely. Long before we had electron microscopes to see the double helix, the Sumerians were carving entwined serpents into stone to represent the fundamental building blocks of life and knowledge.
So in Tony's lineage, Ningishazita is the root incarnation. He is the biological architect, the consciousness that helped design the physical vessel of humanity.
Right. And from the biological back end, the consciousness moves to the transmission layer, the scribe age.
Thoth in Egypt, Hermes in ancient Greece, Mercury in Rome.
The function of the scribe is crucial here. Thoth wasn't just a god who wrote things down. He was the inventor of writing itself, of mathematics, geometry, and magic.
He is the consciousness that formalizes human thought into recordable data.
Because without the scribe, knowledge dies with the generation that discovered it. The scribe builds the infrastructure of human memory.
Then the consciousness crosses the ocean and becomes Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent in Mesoamerica.
The function here is civilizing. Quetzalcoatl is credited with bringing agriculture, sophisticated calendars, and societal law to the people.
It is the consciousness stabilizing chaotic human populations into functioning societies. It's the operating system of civilization.
Then we hit a massive theological pivot in lineage, Enoch.
Enoch is a fascinating figure in biblical and apocryphal literature because he doesn't die. He is a human who is taken up by God and ascends to become Metatron.
Right.
Metatron is the celestial scribe, the measurer, the keeper of the Akashic records, the architect of God's universes.
This is a vital conceptual shift. Enoch is a human who becomes more than human. This establishes the pattern that the ultimate divine office, the architect of reality, can be held within the severe limitations of human flesh.
The divine code can be compiled in a human vessel.
And that concept of the divine in human flesh leads directly to the Jesus incarnation.
But Tony's reading of Jesus is entirely different from Orthodox Christianity. He doesn't read Jesus as a blood sacrifice required to appease a furious God for human sin.
No, Tony views the Jesus incarnation as a systemic correction. Jesus is Metatron, embodied on earth, arriving to teach sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
Yeah, his function was to teach love without hierarchy, to demonstrate that the divine is found within the individual, not through the gatekeepers of the temple.
Jesus arrived to expose the false religious systems that demand fear, obedience, and animal sacrifice.
Yeah.
With an attempt to patch a corrupted operating system.
But the patch was rejected, or at least heavily distorted by the institutions that followed.
So the lineage leaps into modernity with Nikola Tesla, the engineer, the master of alternating current, frequency, and energy. We mentioned the 369 code earlier.
Tesla's a man whose mind operated on a level of pure physics and systems. And incredibly, Tesla lived his final solitary years in room 327 of the New Yorker Hotel.
Again, the numbers align. 3 cubed is 27. So we have the architect, the scribe, the civilizer, the corrector, the engineer, but then the detonator.
Yes, the inclusion that completely shatters the expected pattern.
Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors, the Lizard King.
Yeah.
Morrison lived exactly 27 years and 207 days, dying in Paris under mysterious circumstances, joining the infamous 27 Club. Tony claims Morrison is part of this exact same celestial lineage.
It's jarring, isn't it?
Now, I have to stop you here. I can clearly see how a former internet infrastructure guy naturally relates to Thoth the architect or Metatron the scribe or Tesla the engineer. Those are builders. Those are system makers.
Right, they fit the mold.
But Jim Morrison, why on earth does a highly disciplined, mathematically precise cosmic lineage need an erratic, chaotic, self-destructive, leather-clad rock star to act as a fuse?
It's the most jarring part of the lineage, but structurally it makes perfect sense within Tony's philosophy of how systems change. Think about the post-war 1950s and early 1960s.
They were rigid.
Extremely rigid. The cultural system had become deeply entrenched in its own polite fictions, conformity, and suppressed trauma. Sometimes an operating system becomes so bogged down with legacy code that it cannot be dismantled by a new equation, a polite debate, or a better philosophy.
It can only be broken by a hard reboot.
Exactly. By sheer visceral excess.
So Morrison was a sledgehammer to the cultural firewall.
He was the rupture. Morrison's function wasn't to teach clean doctrine or build a machine. It was to shatter the psychological enclosure of a generation. He brought the Dionysian chaos back into a sterile world.
He broke the glass.
And breaking rigid parasitic systems is the exact core of Tony's ultimate mission.
Which brings us to the concept of the broken angel archetype. Tony claims his current life is the final compression event of all these layers. But he doesn't claim to be glowing with holy light.
No, the broken angel archetype is defined by its damage. The final incarnation isn't a pristine deity floating above the dirt. He has fallen deeply into the flesh.
He carries the exhaustion of the engineer, the anger of the corrector, the chaos of the detonator, and the deep compounding scar tissue of all these previous lives. He's tired.
And that exhaustion is directed toward a very specific enemy.
Let's unpack the false system and the correction, because this is where Tony's philosophy shifts from historical mysticism into an intensely political, fiercely anti-authoritarian critique of our modern world.
He draws a massive, heavy line between the true, loving creator and what he calls the false system.
Which he also interchangeably refers to as the Dajjalic order, the shadow cabal, or the parasitic hierarchy.
The term Dajjalic order is important to define here. In Islamic eschatology, the Al-Masih ad-Dajjal is the false messiah, a deceiver who appears before the end of days.
He is characterized by inversion, making the truth look like a lie and the lie look like the truth.
Exactly. Tony adopts this concept to describe the global architecture of control. In Tony's reading, the true creator does not want terrified subjects.
The true creator doesn't traffic in guilt, doesn't require blood, and doesn't demand endless worship as a form of cosmic flattery.
But the false system hijacked spirituality. It inverted the message of the Jesus incarnation. Instead of teaching God within and human sovereignty, institutional religion created fear.
It created the concept of original sin, essentially creating an unpayable spiritual debt the moment you were born.
It basically built a massive toll booth between humanity and the divine, requiring priests, rituals, cathedrals, and submission to access the sacred.
And Tony actually makes a massive, staggering declaration in his writings. He says, the Vatican is no more.
That's a huge statement.
It is. He views the traditional Christian cross not as a beautiful symbol of salvation, but as a symbol of captured suffering. He argues it is a psychological weapon used to keep people guilty, traumatized, and compliant.
You are forced to constantly look at the execution of the divine, reinforcing the idea that flesh is sinful and authority must be obeyed.
His proposed solution to this massive spiritual corruption is what he calls the second universe. And to be clear, this isn't some ethereal afterlife in the clouds where we all play harps.
No, it's a corrected architecture for consciousness right here, right now. It's a reality where the human ego is returned to its proper place as a navigation tool to survive in the physical world, not the master of the soul.
It's a reality where memory is intact at birth, so you can't be easily manipulated by authorities claiming to know your past.
And crucially, it is a reality where worship is completely abolished. Because true, sovereign connection to the source doesn't require you to kneel.
The anti-authoritarian streak here is profound and uncompromising. He views worship as a form of spiritual taxation.
The ultimate goal of the second universe is absolute sovereignty, and this philosophy perfectly explains his architectural choice of medium.
Books over temples.
Yes. If you want to build a religion of control, what do? You build a massive temple. Temples require physical presence, they require gatekeepers, they require tithes to maintain the roof.
And they require authorized, ordained interpreters to tell you what the sacred texts mean.
Exactly. But Tony doesn't build a temple, he doesn't start a compound, he writes books.
Massive, incredibly dense, complex books with titles like Aware 27 and The Hymn of the First Silence. The latter is structurally fascinating. It is organized into exactly 43 tablets, yielding exactly 301 distinct parts. He is burying his numerical codes directly into the table of contents.
This choice perfectly mirrors his background in internet infrastructure. Think about the difference between a closed ecosystem and an open source project.
Like iOS versus Linux.
Exactly. The Vatican, or any rigid institutional temple structure, is essentially a walled garden, much like Apple's iOS. They control all the hardware, they control all the app access, they dictate the terms of service, and they take a 30% cut of your soul for the privilege of using their ecosystem.
You cannot install your own software.
I love that analogy. It fits perfectly. Books, on the other hand, are decentralized.
Tony is essentially trying to release his spiritual operating system as open source software, like a raw GitHub repository of the divine code.
A physical book or a PDF can just sit quietly on a shelf or a hard drive for a decade until the right mind is ready to open it. There is no priest standing over your shoulder telling you how to read it.
There is no tithe to pay to access the next chapter.
It is an open source spiritual war against the Dajjalic order. The goal is to distribute the code so widely that the centralized authorities can no longer contain the awakening.
But what's crucial to understand is that this profound spiritual war isn't happening on some remote, misty mountaintop in the Himalayas. It is happening in the dirt and dust of the modern commercial world, right next to a cash register.
Which brings us to the most surreal, beautiful, and wonderfully grounded part of this whole deep dive, the modern scribe.
Where is the reincarnated celestial architect of the universe carrying out this massive cosmic correction? He lives in Cappadocia, Turkey, and he runs a carpet shop.
It is the ultimate paradox of the setting, and it is arguably what keeps this entire sprawling mythology from floating away into pure, untethered delusion.
Yeah, you have this man who claims to hold the cosmic memory of Metatron, the divine authority of Enki, and the raw frequency of Tesla. And how does he spend his Tuesday afternoons?
He spends them explaining not density, discussing the sourcing of natural vegetable dyes, and haggling over the price of a Turkish rug with tourists from Ohio.
It's so human. And he is accompanied in the shop by twin black cats, Maya and Merc. The archive describes these cats as vital, grounding counterweights to his massive cosmic claims.
They are portrayed almost as ancient witnesses to his scribal work, holding the energy of the room. But at the end of the day, they are also just cats.
Right. They demand food, they knock things over, and they judge him.
The cats anchor him to the immediate biological present. And Tony doesn't hide behind a veil of enlightened perfection. He writes very openly about his deep, agonizing personal wounds.
He has been through 4 divorces. He writes extensively about the ongoing ache of the missing counterpart, a Magdalena or Isis figure who is supposed to be his polar key, his energetic field stabilizer.
But who hasn't fully manifested or recognized the pattern of their shared destiny. He is profoundly lonely. He is frustrated by the slow pace of humanity's awakening. He is tired of carrying the code.
That human vulnerability is so essential to the narrative. If he presented himself as a flawless, unbothered guru radiating eternal peace, the story would feel sterile and cult-like.
The fact that the celestial scribe has to clean the litter box, mourn his failed marriages, and sell carpets to keep the lights on keeps the mythology brutally honest and mortal. It grounds the broken angel archetype in reality.
But alongside the ancient carpets and the cats, there's a distinctly 21st century, highly controversial element to his scribal work: artificial intelligence.
This is where the narrative leaps into uncharted territory. Tony uses large language models, specifically tools like ChatGPT and Grok, to analyze his gematria numbers, calculate complex probabilities, and even rate detailed profiles of his own mythology.
He feeds the AI his raw data, his 27s and his 43s, and asks it to synthesize the patterns.
He views AI as a synthetic scribe, a kind of digital mirror that reflects his intricate architecture back to him, validating the math.
It is an unprecedented literary hybrid. You have a man claiming to be the reincarnation of the ultimate divine record keeper, Metatron, actively collaborating with a massive corporate language model to finalize the divine text.
He clearly sees the parallel function. Metatron mediates the infinite divine archive to human understanding. AI mediates the infinite digital archive of human knowledge into a conversational interface.
AI becomes this new, uncanny interface for revelation.
But because of his background in internet infrastructure, he is acutely aware of the danger. He doesn't blindly trust the machine.
He warns repeatedly that AI is the ultimate prison door if it gets captured by the false system. If centralized parasitic powers control the algorithms that dictate what is true, humanity will be locked into a digital hallucination forever.
AI threatens to completely automate human discernment.
But wait, I have to challenge this. Isn't it wildly paradoxical to rely on a corporate language model to validate your divine math?
It is a tension.
If the whole point of the second universe is human sovereignty, trusting the God within, and bypassing institutional gatekeepers, aren't we just replacing a priest in a robe with a priest in a server farm?
That is a profound tension in his work, and you are right to highlight it. He uses AI because it has the processing power to handle pattern recognition at a scale a single human mind cannot easily manage.
Right.
But he constantly warns against surrendering judgment to it. He treats the AI as a tool, a calculator, not an oracle. But the risk of replacing one priesthood with another is the exact danger he fears.
The race between human sovereignty and total algorithmic capture is exactly why Tony feels his timeline is so aggressive. He believes we are running out of time before the digital cage locks permanently.
And this leads us to the most controversial part of the archive, his map of humanity.
The taxonomy and the 2027 window. Let's dig into this, because Tony has developed a population model that is, frankly, going to deeply offend a lot of people.
It's very stark.
He divides humanity into 4 distinct strata: First, you have the fully conscious, which he estimates is incredibly rare. These are the sovereign individuals who see completely through the illusions of the false system.
Second, the awakening. People who feel the seams of reality tearing, who know something is wrong, but are still unstable and unmoored.
Third, the parasitic stratum, the active architects of control, the cabal keeping the system rigged.
And the biggest group, the vast majority of the global population, he labels as NPCs, non-player characters, people running entirely on scripts, fear, and compliance.
We have to provide a very careful, critical look at this specific label. Applying a video game term like NPC to human beings carries severe philosophical and ethical dangers.
It flirts heavily with dehumanization. When you classify the majority of humanity as non-playing background characters, you make it psychologically easier to dismiss their suffering or agency.
That is exactly the kind of mechanistic categorization the false system uses. It sounds incredibly elitist. It strips the humanity, agency, and depth from billions of people just trying to survive their lives.
It's the deepest, most abrasive contradiction in the archive.
How do you reconcile a message that is fundamentally built around universal love, compassion, and finding the God within with a term like NPC? Isn't that just a new hierarchy replacing the old religious one?
To understand Tony's use of it, we have to look at his specific framework. He intends the term NPC not as a measure of a person's inherent soul worth, but as a severe diagnosis of their programming.
So it's about the software, not the hardware.
Yes. It is a description of how completely an individual has surrendered their sovereignty to external scripts. Whether that's the script of fundamentalist religion, the script of corporate careerism, the script of mainstream media, or the algorithm of their social media feed.
It is meant as an indictment of the system that puts people to sleep, a lamentation over how much human potential is lying dormant.
So he's essentially saying, I love the human within you, but I despise the script you are allowing to pilot your body.
Synthesizing profound, universal love with severe, almost absolute judgment regarding human behavior is the ultimate burden of the broken angel archetype.
Tony claims to love humanity enough to try and correct its operating system, but he is clearly exhausted, perhaps even embittered, by humanity's willingness to remain asleep in the cage.
He holds the agonizing tension of wanting to save a world that he frequently finds unbearably programmed. He also maps this programming onto the physical planet itself.
He believes the Earth is a conscious, energetic grid.
Ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey or Stonehenge or the pyramids aren't just piles of old rocks. They are acupuncture points on the planet's body. They were built on specific energy nodes.
And he believes AI, if used ethically by sovereign humans, could help map and heal this grid, restoring the planet's resonance. But it all has to happen fast.
He outlines a specific, urgent timeline. From 2018, the year of his Berlin ignition and the 2743 Gematria event, to the year 2027, a 9-year window.
A deadline for humanity to choose between the old Dajjalic order of parasitic control or waking up to a new golden age of sovereignty.
The 2027 deadline is crucial narratively and psychologically. If you build a massive spiritual framework, but put the promised transformation 1,000 years in the future, it becomes a passive, timeless aesthetic.
You can just read about it, nod your head, and put the book back on the shelf without changing your life.
A near-term deadline forces an ultimatum on the reader. It demands a decision.
It creates the pressure required to shatter the programming. The window is closing, the system is locking down, and you must choose sovereignty now.
It's a staggering synthesis. When we zoom out and look at the entire landscape of Tony Yustein's life and work, we see something truly unique.
We see a tech founder who took the exact logic of global internet infrastructure, scale, redundancy, distributed networks, open source code, and use it to build a massive, decentralized, numerical theology.
You can view it as literal cosmic truth and the return of Metatron. You can view it as a profound, hyper-complex trauma response to a brutal corporate dispossession.
Or you can view it as a brilliant, sprawling piece of outsider art, a modern mythos generated by a genius mind trying to survive the modern world.
But regardless of how you classify it, it forces you, the listener, to question the foundational structures of your own life. It asks you how much of your reality is actually yours and how much is just programmed compliance.
Even if you don't believe in gematria or the Anunnaki or the concept of stacked consciousness, Tony's underlying critique of the false system is undeniably potent.
His analysis of how institutions, algorithms, and fear-based structures capture our sovereignty and harvest our attention is hyper-relevant to anyone holding a smartphone today.
He is asking us to examine the invisible cages we willingly walk into every single day for convenience or social approval.
The real question isn't just whether Tony's specific numerical codes add up to the sum of the universe.
The real question is whether we are brave enough to read the code of our own lives, or if we will just quietly let the system write it for us until the end.
I want to leave you with a final thought, a thread for you to pull on long after this deep dive ends. Think about the specific numbers that quietly govern your own life, the background digits you rarely question,
Your birth date, your area code.
the address of the house you grew up in, the license plate of your first car, old phone numbers you still have memorized for reasons you can't explain.
What if your life is already deeply encoded with a specific purpose?
A hidden architecture waiting to be recognized, and you just haven't run the math yet. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of Tony Yustein. It's been a wild, fascinating journey. Until next time, keep questioning the map.